Buongiorno, buon pomeriggio, e buonasera, Lazio world. Welcome to our instant reaction pod. Consider this your stoppage time as we review Lecce versus Lazio. I'm your host, Sean McIntosh, joined by a good friend. I'm excited to have him on, an expert, not just on Lazio, but somebody that you should be following and listening to if you are a betting man or woman. Nick from Kicks and Picks podcast. Welcome to the show, brother.
Appreciate it, dude. Appreciate the kind words. I don't want to mislead the audience. I don't know that experts exist in the world of betting, but definitely appreciate it. We try our best.
Well, it's good to have a fellow Laziale on, and we've got a lot to chat about. Particularly, it's I don't know. This one's an interesting one. Results there, but a lot in between to discuss. So. Let's jump right in where we typically do on this podcast, and that's with the starting 11. Great to see Romagnoli back in the starting 11, paired with Gila, Provedel, of course, in goal. You've got your left back, Nuno Tavares, Lazzari, your standard, typical Rovella Guendouzi manning that midfield, Isaacson on the right, Diaz sitting just behind Tati, Zaccagni at the left. So it is it's essentially your full squad back at it against a Lecce side. You expect a big result coming off of a 6-0 thumping. And it starts kind of quick for Lazio. 7-minute mark, Lazzari with a decent little strike. It's saved. Not a ton to do for the keeper, but it's something. First 15 minutes though, I thought Lazio really needed to assert more dominance on the ball. It was quick to be pointed in the direction that this was going to be a fairly sloppy match. You see Lazio more or less cutting out anything that Lecce was trying to do, but from an attacking standpoint, not much there until the 45th minute. 3 minutes into stoppage time, you have Tati Castellanos earning a penalty. Does really well off of what was a stunning assist, a Pirlo-like assist from Rovella, harken back to the Pirlo to Grosso, really reminded me of that pass. He feeds Tati with two nice shots that ultimately is stopped because of a handball effort on the goal line. Red card to Lecce, penalty to Lazio. It's not Zaccagni that steps up to the plate, who is your typical penalty taker, but Tati, who cleanly slots it away. It's 1-0 going into half. Lazio up a man. You've got a 10-man Lecce for a full 45, and it's Lecce that comes out of halftime. 5 minutes into it, Morente with an absolute stunner, a volley back of the net. It's 1-1, and Lazio is forced to suffer through almost an entire half until it's Marusic. Who would have bet on that? Not even you, Nick, our betting expert.
No way.
Couldn't have placed money on Marusic being the man. 87th minute. It's a nice goal. It is the winner. Sees us through. It's the 3 points that we had to have. Not sure it's the way we drew it up or wanted to see it. But Nick, give me your 3 words or less to describe this match.
It's never easy. It's never easy.
It's good. That's a good 3 words because you're right. Being a Lazio fan is never easy. Mine was not enough bite. I thought,
I like it.
We were, I don't know. And I'll throw this back to you, but maybe it felt like we lost some venom. We lost that Inter match still maybe in our heads. I saw it in we'll talk about individual performances, but in players that you typically see have a license to attack. So I think about particularly Nuno Tavares, a player. I texted Caleb during this match, and I was like, it seems like, did Baroni place a leash on Nuno? Because I don't know if he was afraid because he's coming off of a pretty poor match, as the rest of the team was against Inter. I don't know if there was a fear. There was like extra caution. Players didn't want to make mistakes, but it seems like we were lacking bite. What do you attribute that to?
I think you're spot on. For him particularly, it's you know, the level wasn't sustainable, right? The way he started his Lazio career, I think we're all excited and we've seen the highest of high. Well, now the last two games we've seen maybe the lowest of low from him. I think you're exactly right. It's I was starting to think the Inter match may have broken our spirits, and I said this last week. Um, it's the first time all year, regardless of result, and I don't care about the 6-0 finish to the scoreline. It's the first time we really broke, right? That you can say the mentality of this team, they weren't in it after that second goal in the first half. And after they gave up a goal early in the second half here, that's the first thing that came to my mind. You just said it, and I couldn't agree more. It was, did Inter break our spirit? Are we going to be able to recover from this? So the fact that we did, listen, we can complain about a lot of things. I want 3 points against a team like Lecce every single time we play. I don't care how it comes. I've argued about that when Sadi was our coach, that we weren't getting the right results. We didn't have the right mentality. I'm going to take a step back from criticism because we got those 3 points, and that's all that really matters. And it's enough of a response. But I do agree with your point. Just definitely seemed like they forgot about the mojo that they've had for the previous month or 6 weeks. So I don't know why, but hopefully the 3 points will put us back on the right path.
Yeah, there's two coins to this, and I think it's important we talk about both sides. The two there's a fork in the road, and this team can go one of two ways. I think, yeah, this win can spark a little bit of confidence to say, look, either way, like no matter what, we all, and I tweeted this, like 3 points is 3 points. Doesn't elicit a ton of confidence, particularly with Atalanta ahead, but 3 points is 3 points. We've been in positions where we've dropped completely, where we've had zero response, that we put our heads in the dirt and bent over, whatever. And we did the absolute bare minimum to get by. And I'm stupid. I go into these matches like high expectations, be like, all right, it's Lecce. I don't just want the 3 points. I need a bit of a response. I need to feel better about this side after that Inter match. It should be a 3-0 thumping. Then you go up a man and you're like, all right, let's completely, not have to stress about it. And Lazio, in typical fashion, right, reminds us every single time, this is what's going to happen. This is the script. So I should have known better, but I can be maybe confident and say, okay, we got the job done. That's all that matters. Move on. Or I can look at this and go, have we lost the mojo at kind of the worst time? Because that's what made this squad really special, is it wasn't just eking out. And sometimes we did, right? But it was this tenacity, this lack of fear, this like Baroni ball that was such a difference from what we saw under Sadi. That was refreshing. It was fun. It was mojo. It was confidence. It was, Nuno, just forget it. Like, go darting runs, get out there. It's Zaccagni putting his head down, beating guys. It's Isaac. It's players, regardless of performance, still going out there and kind of just throwing it out and playing in this sometimes reckless fashion.
Right.
And because they got kind of cut off at the knees last week, I'm hoping that it wasn't like they're playing with a little bit of fear now. That would be my hope. So we'll see which way it goes. Let's just again, it's Atalanta, and then it's the derby next. That's my fear. So let's talk I guess individual performances. Who did you have as your man of the match?
Really strong case can be made for Tati. I feel like obviously, earned the goal, got a goal from the penalty spot, but he's relentless. I critique him a lot. I think his finishing leaves a lot to be desired, but you can never critique the work rate, the selflessness. He's going to be super important for us for hopefully a long time. So I think you can make a good case for him. It's tough. I'm like in between. It's kind of that core in the middle. Romagnoli being back, I thought Gila had a really good game, but Guendouzi and Rovella also kind of bossed when we needed them to. So like, I don't want to cop out and say those four, but just kind of that middle of the pack, middle of the park. Um, Having that starting unit back together to me made the difference. So I don't know that any one stood out over another, but when it mattered, those were the guys pushing the buttons and making the stops and getting us forward. So I guess if I had to single somebody out, it's probably Tati, but I think equally important was that spine of the team.
Yeah, Patrick Bowman on YouTube agrees. Tati, his man of the match. I thought particularly early on, Tati had a couple really, really nice balls. He had played one over the top, 30th minute, just an absolutely beautiful ball. Isaacson, I thought, did really nice to track that down, right? It's coming up over top. He doesn't have eyes on it, does a nice job to settle it down, gets a shot off, like, decent save, decent shot. Like he at least got it on frame, forced the keeper to do something. Tati in this one, I thought he was coming off of two really poor matches prior, was a lot more active, was a lot more of what you saw. I really liked what I saw from one. It's like a typical Rovella match. Just like he just does everything. You start to take it for granted where it's just like, oh, that's just what he does. And I tweeted this. There was an account on Twitter that posted his. I think it's an Atalanta account. I want to make sure I give the right credit. It's Atalanta matches view. So at ATA_match_views. Put his top 10 Serie A players right now, and he included Rovella in the list. And you've got folks that are kind of chiming in like, what, Rovella? What are you talking about? And so I tweeted, for me, the easiest way to know if somebody knows ball or actually watches Serie A matches is their take on Rovella. If you see any top list, I don't care what it is, top midfielders, top 10, top 20, whatever, and you see Rovella's name on there and you're outraged, you're an idiot. Or you're not watching the games. Like a way to easily call yourself out on social as a non-ball knower, because everything he does has been elite. He doesn't drop stinkers. He covers up so many mistakes. He is one of the best defensive ball-winning, ball-tackling midfielders in the world, period. Like there's no question. When it comes to that alone, he's got a lot of work to do to still improve to be an elite regista.
Right.
I think he's focusing maybe too much on, and it's not his focus. It's just what it's demanded of him. Like we would be conceding way too many goals, right? The energy he exerts
stops every fast break before it starts. Like that's the stuff that doesn't show up in the stat sheet.
Exactly.
He's letting Guendouzi go forward every opportunity possible. Like you can't quantify that, but
you can't.
But
everybody's looking at the surface level stats, and that's what's going to get seen, right? So unless he's dropping absolute dimes that lead to assists, because he had the dimes today, they just didn't lead to assists, or he's scoring goals. Which is why that remember when he scored that banger that got ruled off because of some bullcrap foul in the lead up. That's why I was so devastated about that, because the attention he's not going to get that unless he has these goals. But better, I guess it's better that he doesn't get the attention. We don't want to lose him. But again, easiest way to signal yourself out as somebody that just doesn't quite know is your take on Rovella. But Gila is another one. He had a brilliant performance. It just cleaned up so much. His pace obviously has a lot to do with it. And then the credit, which we give Caleb and I a ton of credit on this podcast, to a man who very often doesn't get highlighted, because we've said this before, he doesn't quite like pop off like a Gila, is Romagnoli. And you saw him back. Because he is so positionally sound, really good with his communication, he allows Gila to push up and be in those positions. So I just thought the center backs in Rovella were really good. I probably, for me, I don't know. It's really a toss up between Rovella and Gila. I kind of want to give it to Rovella because of a couple of those dimes were just so good. And again, I think we
Fair.
concede in a match like this without his work rate. But Tati's still a really good shout. I thought he was our best attacker today for sure. What about Bidone?
Got to be Provedel, I think.
Really?
I
Okay.
don't want to take away from the goal, but could he have done a little better? I don't know.
Okay.
I think the question at least deserves to be asked, and maybe a bit of that is like residual of I just don't think he's had a good year overall. So I'm probably scrutinizing him a little bit more than I should. He's obviously been fantastic for us overall, but I think his level has dropped just a little bit. I don't know if that's coming back from an injury thing. I don't know what to attribute it to, but I think I'm a little more critical. I think Dia could get the other shout, right? He was pretty much invisible for 45 minutes.
Yeah. I think I didn't have Providel in mind. I thought it was just a really it was both a bit unlucky, right? In that it's a deflection that kind of drops perfectly, and then it's a incredible volley. I do think you're right in saying Providel hasn't been quite what he was 2 years ago. I think the biggest difference is that he was making match saving
Yeah,
saves, like
fair.
saves that he shouldn't make. And so maybe we're not seeing that as often. So it's easier to critique him. I do think this was another poor match from Dia, which was really unfortunate for him to not get that goal because it was one of those really
Yeah.
good Tati to Dia connections. But overall, he was invisible until that moment. I'll ask you this, Nick, because you mentioned the frustrations you have with Tati, and I think that's where most of us stand when it comes to him. He does so much right. Caleb and I have talked about this. Today was a match for me that really highlighted maybe the head scratching for me of why this doesn't happen. But Dia completely invisible, Tati doing a lot of the work. I think that Dia might be a better finisher than Tati. What's your thoughts on those two swapping roles?
I think it's worth a conversation. It's worth a shot. I mean, everything Baroni, I think, has done a really good job of getting all of our wingers involved and motivated and playing well. I think Zaccagni's been pretty consistent over the past few years. He still looks up for it. Isaacson, to me, has probably taken the biggest step forward. And even putting his production, some of his goals and assists lately aside, I think he's been up for every match that he started. You see him running at defenders. You see him chasing down every ball. Pedro obviously has turned the clock back, right? And Noslin has looked good. So I think the system has been figured out. Even though it looked a little bit stale today, right? Maybe by comparison to some other games, the two players you mentioned is still where I think you're right. We have to maybe give it a shot, or we have to change something to. I don't even know what other formation we'd go to, but we're not getting the best out of Tati and Dia, and certainly when they're on the field at the same time, we're not getting the best out of them. So we've seen Dia. I think when Tati wasn't playing or he was hurt for a little bit and he wasn't getting the starts, Dia carried the team for a little bit, right? Had those like 6 goals in 3 games or in 4 games or something like that. The two of them haven't figured it out together, and I don't know if that's a formation, position thing, chemistry thing. We got to try something. So I would love to kind of see what you're proposing, because Tati is going to look for the ball. He is going to make the runs. He is going to do the work. Sitting him a little further back is not the worst thing in the world. He's
Yeah,
not
because you
he's
find
not
them
a
oftentimes.
superstar out in the ball, but he's not
Right.
terrible on the ball either.
Yep.
So
I mean, you find oftentimes, and again, I think that's where he shines is you see him doing the dirty work. Today, there were times where he's not getting the ball, so he's going to come and fight back. So particularly these past 2-3 matches where you completely see Dia invisible, I think why not swap those two? Why not put Tati in a little bit more positions where he's playing onto the ball a little bit more, use his playmaking, use his grit, and then see if we can just find Dia in more dangerous positions. Because look, the goal that was ruled off, like a nice finishing touch, like he
Yep.
has that. He has an instinct in the box, and it's why he scored so many goals early in the season
Yep.
for us. I figure those two are struggling. Maybe instead of doing the more drastic change in formation, let's just see those two swap roles a little bit and put Dia in a position maybe to get his confidence up. But
No, I think that's well put. And, this is a guy who carried a pretty awful Salernitana team, right? Like, you don't score double-digit goals on a terrible team by accident. You need to have that level of skill, that level of finishing. If he can carry a line kind of by himself, he doesn't have to on our team. So that could be a little new for him, but maybe putting him in better spots is the answer to unlock him a little bit more.
yeah. So, the other player we briefly touched on, but in my running for Bidone was Nuno Tavares. I thought he dropped a stinker, and particularly because the expectations now for him are really high. And mentioned I didn't know and couldn't tell if this was result of maybe direction from the manager, whether it was a lack of confidence from Nuno, who is a player that he's got to be confident. He's got to be providing some of those runs in a match like this that was screaming for a little bit of individual class, particularly when Lecce went down. There's a little bit more space to be had. I was shocked that we didn't see Nuno. There were times he had the ball, had some space, and he was just passing it off. What do you think that's attributed to? Is that again just a falter of kind of everybody? Is that him being tired? Seems like it's a couple matches now. Should we be concerned?
Yeah, I'm wondering if he's not 100% fit. That was kind of my first thought. But yeah, to me, if the entire level of the team isn't where it needs to be in any particular match, it's easy to get sucked into that. So I tend to agree. He's not this bad, right? I expect to bounce back for sure, but definitely a couple of puzzling games in a row. So I'm interested to see what the next month looks like from this guy, because we're going to need him. Like you said, the games against Atalanta and games against Roma. If he can take over and create that danger and overlap and put balls into the box, we're a different team.
Yeah, absolutely. And just quickly reviewing the stats on this one. Lazio, 60% possession, expected goals 1.96 to 0.63. Again, pretty much on par with what the final score ended up being. You expect a lot better. Total shots 13 to 11 for Lazio. 7 of those on target, only 2 on target from Lecce. 3 big chances, 2 of those missed. Continues kind of the tail with Lazio. Too many opportunities missed. But the big difference this year versus last is that we are at least creating more big chances, though I did think today was one of those matches where we didn't quite create enough. Taking a look at the live table now, we see Lazio in 4th, which may be short-lived, but 17 matches played, 34 points. That's 11 wins, 1 draw, 5 losses. This Lazio side either wins their matches or loses them. There is very rarely anything in between. But, we've got Atalanta yet to play their 17th match. Inter, 2 matches in hand. Fiorentina just behind us, also 2 matches in hand. One as a result of a match being postponed and yet to play this weekend. Lazio, of course, next week with the huge one against Atalanta, with the derby right after. And then it is a celebratory match against Como. Lazio celebrating their 125th anniversary a day after their birthday against Como. We'll get to a little bit of that match because I do want to discuss. I'm not sure if you've seen online some of the leaks, but real quick, going into Atalanta, Nick, how do you approach that? Is there maybe a lineup or an approach you want to see? And then give me a little bit of your week out predictions for that?
Yeah, you mentioned it at the top of the show. I mean, essentially our starting 11 today, right? Our strongest possible lineup. The thing that worries me about that, and I said it twice today, and I guess the second time it worked out, some of these substitutions are head scratching. And that has to do with obviously who we have available, some of our depth. But if you start this same 11, or, who are you going to off the bench when you need something? If Noslin is hurt, for which it looks like, I don't think he'll be back next week. That's just one less guy that we have. So that's what worries me a little bit. I mean, Pedro off the bench has obviously worked forever, so it's tough to critique that. But I almost wonder if you give him the start and you get Isaacson on the bench, and let fresh legs like his come on a little bit later. So that's kind of my worry. I think the formation largely has worked for us. I mean, obviously, Rovella and Guendouzi are indispensable, right? Those guys have to start every game available. So I don't know. That's really kind of my only worry. And Atalanta really is a wild card. They haven't kept it consistent game in and game out, and because they have that luxury, they have a ton of depth. I feel like people are finally starting to talk about it, right? Obviously, we've all known about Inter, but Atalanta retools and retools and retools, and they have 3 or 4 guys that are probably starting on any other team in Serie A that sit the bench for them. So that's worries me, right? We've seen Retegui, who leads the league in goals, get benched 2 games in a row, or get pulled in the 60th minute because they're up, or they don't need him, or hey, let's just bring in Lookman, or let's bring in CDK, who by the way is on fire, or you know, so it's so tough to game plan for them because you don't know how they're going to line up, you don't know what their formation is going to be, and um, they've looked largely really good. I think they've had 2 terrible games, right, where Inter took it to them, and one other really surprising loss. I forget if it was to Lecce or somebody like that. Outside of that, they've dominated almost every game they played. So that's kind of what worries me in this one. Like, what do we have up our sleeve to combat what they have up their sleeve?
Yeah, I think the point on our approach to substitutions is a really great point, Nick. We're starting to pick up some knocks, and we are at least a point in the season where we are playing week to week until Europa resumes and we're back to Coppa Italia. But for now, we don't have to necessarily worry about rotation. I am curious to see Baroni's approach now because it was a pretty easy rhythm for him. It became predictable, not in a bad way, but we just knew, and the players knew, and it was good for them. But now I want to see his approach. Is it go with your best 11 no matter what, or is it that full 90-minute thought process to say, look, we've got to have a punch, we've got to have something left in the tank for when we get to that 60th 70th minute. I think taking a look around, we don't have a lot of that explosiveness off the bench. If Noslin's out, if you're starting your Isaacson, obviously Nuno Tavares, an explosive player, Zaccagni, all these guys, and the way that Baroni typically plays, they're going to run out of gas against an Atalanta side. So I do think that is a question worth asking: is should we perhaps hold on to an Isaacson, or even something as wild as saying like maybe just, I don't know, start Pellegrini or and throw Nuno. I don't know.
Right.
It's just what is our option off the bench? Pedro can't always be that answer. He's just a different player. He's not gonna be the one to just put them on their heels.
Right.
And so Chauna, right? He's a little bit inconsistent. He's young. I don't know that he's the answer. I do like what I see from him. He's at least somebody that never seems like short on confidence or willingness to take someone on and shoot the ball. But I am curious to see Baroni's approach to that. Let's finish this off with your thoughts. Did you see the leak on Lazio's potential anniversary kit to be worn against Como in a couple weeks?
Was it white?
Yeah.
Then I did see it.
Okay.
I didn't know
Thought.
what I was looking at the time. I didn't put two and two together until you just told me, but a little underwhelming.
Okay. Okay. I loved it. And maybe that is because I am a sucker for a great nod to history and retro vibes. And so that harkened back to Lazio in the late 70s, kind of a remake of some specialty kits they had using that old logo that hasn't been used in forever. We typically will use that one retro logo that's like that diamond
Yeah.
crest. So going back to this in that 70-ish look, like I'm a sucker for retro vibes. So it's easy to get me. It is a shirt that would look a whole hell of a lot better with the sponsor on that. But I'm never going to be mad at a nice, just clean kit. So for me, I was excited about it. I am ready to throw my money at it. Excited to see any of the like track suits if they're going retro
That'd be
vibe
cool.
with some of that. But an important date, 125 years celebrating this club, doing it against Como, who we had a really great match against earlier in this league. Should be a fun one. But we've got two really important ones between then, the Derby being one of them, Atalanta, critical point for this season. But Nick, appreciate you jumping on. You want to give the people listening a bit of a shout on where they can follow you, check out your work?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me on. As always, thank you for, carrying the torch for this club, right? We got to stick together. So appreciate all the content you guys put out for sure. Find me on Twitter, Kicks and Picks Podcast at Kicks Picks Pod. We do live shows typically on Wednesday nights on Twitter and YouTube, but cover all Serie A, usually EPL, also Champions League for any of your betting needs. So if you're new to betting or if you're a seasoned loser like the rest of us, because anybody that tells you they aren't is full of shit, definitely give us a shout. It's a different way to look at some of these matchups and preview the game. So we have a lot of fun with it.
Love it. Appreciate it. Follow Nick, follow Kicks and Picks Pod. And of course, follow us. We are on every audio platform, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Give us those 5-star ratings. They go a long way in pushing our podcasts out there. Of course, we are live on YouTube after every match. Subscribe, help us grow. As Nick said, us Laziali got to stick together. Whether we're getting thumped 6-0, hanging on for dear life against a 10-sided Lecce,